My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 38 years old, and I manage operations for a regional medical supply company in Portland. 3 months before my younger brother Ethan's wedding in Hawaii, my mother hand-sewed matching blue airline luggage tags for herself and Dad. She stitched our family name onto each one with tiny white thread because she said it would make spotting their suitcases easier in Honolulu. At 8:14 p.m. on April 9, one notification erased all that quiet excitement. Months later, those same blue luggage tags would sit untouched on my dining room table beside a sealed envelope no one wanted to open. Here's what none of us understood that evening, and what took me far too many years to admit. Missing plane tickets weren't the real story. They were simply the first undeniable piece of evidence that our family had been measuring love by a different set of rules all along. Growing up, our family never announced favorites. We didn't have to. The rankings revealed themselves in smaller ways, so ordinary that outsiders would have missed them. Ethan always received the first phone call, the first invitation, the first apology whenever something went wrong. The rest of us adjusted around him as naturally as furniture being moved for a holiday gathering. The blue luggage tags became another quiet symbol of that hope. Mom finished them on January 22, nearly 5 months before the wedding. She placed them in a small cedar box with their passports and checked every few weeks to make sure nothing had expired. She wasn't obsessed with traveling. In fact, she hated flying. But Ethan had chosen Hawaii, and she wanted to be there because mothers convinced themselves that showing up is another way of saying, "I'm still here for you." Dad, Richard, was 72 and retired after 41 years repairing city buses. Arthritis made even buttoning his shirt slow, yet he walked 2 miles every morning because he wanted enough stamina to enjoy the beaches Ethan had described over video calls. Every Saturday, he watched travel videos about Oahu while making coffee in the old stainless steel percolator he'd owned since 1989. He kept saying he wanted to see the Pacific just once before his knees made long trips impossible. Looking back, I recognize my own role in everything that followed. Whenever Ethan forgot birthdays, I reminded everyone that he was busy. When he missed anniversaries, I called him scatterbrained instead of selfish. When Mom quietly covered expenses he promised to repay, I changed the subject before Dad could object. I wasn't protecting peace. I was protecting a pattern because admitting it existed would have required all of us to confront something uncomfortable. By early March, every detail seemed settled. On March 3rd at 6:42 p.m., Ethan posted in our family group chat that travel arrangements were completely handled. His fiancée, Natalie, replied with a spreadsheet showing arrival dates, hotel reservations, and shuttle schedules. My cousin Leah responded with a thumbs-up emoji. Uncle Martin joked about needing sunscreen stronger than anything sold in Oregon. Mom even printed the spreadsheet and tucked it into the cedar box beside the blue luggage tags. 2 weeks later, during Sunday dinner at my parents' house, I asked one more time, in front of everyone, "Mom, Dad, you both received your flight information, right?" Before either of them could answer, Ethan smiled across the table, reached for another dinner roll, and said, "Don't make everything so dramatic. Everything's under control." Mom smiled the way she always did when Ethan sounded confident. She nodded once, folded the printed itinerary back into the cedar box, and changed the subject to whether Hawaii would be warm enough in late June for Dad to leave his heavier jacket at home. I wish that had been the end of it. Instead, on April 9th at exactly 8:14 p.m., my phone buzzed while I was folding laundry in my apartment. The message came from Natalie, not Ethan. "Claire, quick question. Are your parents booking separate flights?" Ethan said they were handling their own travel. For a moment I thought she had sent it to the wrong person. I walked straight to my parents' house, arriving 12 minutes later. Their dining room table was covered with everything they planned to pack. Dad had laid out a lightweight navy blazer. Mom had already rolled 2 floral dresses into neat bundles to keep them from wrinkling. The cedar box sat open in the center of the table, and the blue luggage tags rested beside it, waiting to be attached to suitcases that suddenly had nowhere to go. I showed Mom the text. She frowned not in anger, but in confusion. "That can't be right," she said softly. Ethan told us everything was arranged. Dad unlocked his old laptop, the one that took nearly 3 minutes to start. We searched every email account, every spam folder, every confirmation message. There were hotel reservations. There was the wedding schedule. There was information about the welcome dinner. There were no airline tickets. At 8:51 p.m., I called Ethan. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, what's up?" "I need you to explain something," I said as calmly as I could. "Natalie thinks Mom and Dad are booking their own flights." A short silence. Then he sighed. "Oh, yeah, just those 2 words." I waited for the rest. "It didn't make sense to spend another $2,480 on airfare," he finally said. "We had to prioritize." I looked at my parents across the table. Mom was still holding one of the luggage tags between her fingers, slowly rubbing the stitched letters with her thumb. "You told them they were included." I said we'd figure it out. "No," I answered. "You said it was completely handled." Another pause. Then came the sentence I'd heard in different forms my entire life. "Don't make everything so dramatic." I stared at the finished suitcases lined neatly against the hallway wall. Dad had already attached one blue tag to the larger suitcase. Mom had packed sunscreen she bought on sale in February. Everything in that room spoke of people who believed they were wanted. Everything on my phone said otherwise. What hurt most wasn't the missing tickets. It was realizing my parents hadn't even been important enough to receive a phone call explaining the decision. Mom quietly removed the luggage tag from Dad's suitcase and placed it back inside the cedar box. She didn't cry. She didn't accuse anyone. She simply looked at Dad and said, almost apologetically, "Well, I suppose we unpack before the ice cream melts." That sentence broke something in me. As we carried the clothes back upstairs, memories kept forcing themselves forward. Ethan forgetting to save them seats at his college graduation. Scheduling Thanksgiving dinner 2 hours earlier than he told our parents. Asking Dad to repair his fence over an entire weekend, then leaving before Dad finished because friends had invited him boating. Every incident had sounded small by itself. Every time I'd explained it away. Busy. Stressed. Poor communication. Different priorities. Standing in my parents' bedroom, folding Hawaiian shirts back into dresser drawers, I finally admitted the truth. I hadn't just watched the pattern. I'd helped make it invisible. The next morning, I started calling the people who should have cared as much as I did. My Aunt Denise answered first. She listened without interrupting while I explained exactly what had happened, including the timestamps, the messages, and the missing flights. When I finished, she sighed. "Claire, weddings are stressful. You know how these things go. Maybe they just ran out of money. They could have told Mom and Dad. I'm sure they meant to." That phrase settled over the conversation like dust. Meant to. As though intentions somehow mattered more than actions. An hour later, I called my cousin Mark. He laughed awkwardly before saying, "Honestly, if your parents really wanted to go, couldn't they just buy their own tickets? Don't make it into some huge family crisis." I thanked him for his opinion and ended the call before my frustration found its voice. By lunchtime, I realized something uncomfortable. The family system didn't survive because Ethan created it. It survived because everyone else found polite reasons not to challenge it. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang again. This time it was Mrs. Eleanor Watkins, my parents' 70-year-old next-door neighbor. Mom must have mentioned the situation while returning a borrowed casserole dish. "I heard what happened," Eleanor said without preamble. I braced myself for another excuse. Instead, she quietly asked, "Are your parents all right?" No one else had asked that. Not once. "They're pretending to be." There was a brief silence before she answered. "They've spent 40 years showing up for everyone else. Maybe it's time someone showed up for them." Those words felt like permission. Not permission to fight. Permission to stop protecting people who had never protected them. That evening, I called Ethan one final time. "I have an idea," I said. "I'll cover half the airfare. You cover the other half. Mom and Dad don't even need to know there was a problem." He didn't respond immediately. "I appreciate the offer," he finally said, though he didn't sound appreciative. "So that's a yes?" "No." I waited. "The guest list is already complicated. Seating is finalized. Transportation is planned. Changing things now creates problems. They're your parents. I know who they are. His voice stayed calm, almost bored. You already invited them. I invited everyone. Then why don't they have tickets? Another pause. Then his familiar sentence arrived exactly as before. Don't make everything so dramatic. For the first time in my life, the words didn't make me question myself. They explained him. I took a slow breath. I'm not asking for anything unreasonable. You are, actually. How? If we spend more money now, Natalie will think I handled the budget badly. Her parents already contributed more than mine did. I don't need people judging me before the wedding. There it was. Not money. Not logistics. Appearance. His image mattered more than whether our parents witnessed one of the biggest days of his life. Before I could answer, he continued. And if you keep pushing this, people are going to think you're trying to ruin the wedding. Mom will feel guilty. Dad will be embarrassed. Everyone will remember you as the one who created drama. It was an ultimatum built from reputation, guilt, and family loyalty. He was asking me to protect his comfort by sacrificing my parents' dignity. I looked across my apartment at the cedar box sitting on the coffee table. Mom had insisted I take it home because she couldn't bear seeing the blue luggage tags every time she walked through the hallway. For several minutes, I simply stared at them. Then something inside me became unexpectedly quiet. I realized I had spent years trying to earn a better place inside a system that only worked because someone was always expected to accept less. I wasn't interested in winning that position anymore. If our family couldn't make room for my parents at a wedding in Hawaii, then I would build a place where they never had to wonder whether they belonged. I opened my laptop that evening and began writing a message to the family group chat. The first version lasted exactly 3 sentences before I deleted it. If any of you think forgetting your own parents is normal, then you've mistaken convenience for love. Delete. The second draft was even sharper. Enjoy the photographs. Someday they'll remind you who wasn't standing beside you. Delete. Neither message would help my parents. They would only give everyone something new to argue about. At 7:48 p.m., I sent the only version that mattered. Mom and Dad won't be attending the Hawaii wedding. Instead, we'll be spending that weekend together here in Portland. If anyone would like to join us before or after their travel, you're welcome. No explanations are necessary and no one needs to choose sides. I simply want Mom and Dad to know they're celebrated. Ethan replied 43 seconds later. Do whatever you want. That was all. No apology. No question about our parents. Just dismissal. The wedding weekend arrived on June 28th. According to my cousin Leah, the ceremony overlooking the ocean was beautiful. The flowers were white orchids. The reception overlooked Waikiki Beach. Every table setting matched perfectly, but she admitted the room felt strangely incomplete whenever someone asked where Richard and Helen were. Back home, our gathering looked nothing like a luxury destination. Mrs. Watkins baked peach cobbler. Uncle Martin grilled salmon in my backyard. 3 folding tables borrowed from the neighborhood church didn't quite line up, and 2 children spilled lemonade before lunch. Nobody cared. Dad laughed more that afternoon than I'd heard in years. Mom finally attached the blue luggage tags to 2 canvas picnic baskets instead of suitcases, smiling as she said they deserved to travel somewhere after all. That simple gesture carried more joy than any first-class ticket ever could. Months later, Ethan appeared at my front door without calling first. I answered, greeted him politely, and asked him to wait on the porch while I finished washing dishes. For the first time, he waited instead of expecting everyone else to. When we finally sat down, he tried familiar arguments. He said weddings were stressful. He said budgets were complicated. He said people misunderstood him. None of it changed the silence between us. Eventually, he asked the only honest question he'd spoken in months. Do you think Mom and Dad will ever trust me again? I considered it carefully. That isn't my answer to give. I told him there was only one condition if he wanted our family to move forward. He needed to rebuild his relationship with our parents without asking me to translate, defend, or supervise it. Weeks later, he visited them alone. I never asked what was said. Mom only told me they talked for nearly 3 hours over coffee, and that some conversations deserved privacy if they were going to mean anything. That was enough. A year has passed. Every June now, regardless of where anyone has traveled, we hold a family picnic at the same neighborhood park. The rule is wonderfully simple. No reserved seats. No guest rankings. No one waits to be remembered. Ethan comes early now. Last month, I noticed him quietly carrying Dad's folding chair from the car before anyone asked. He also handed Mom the blue luggage tags, suggesting she keep them on the picnic baskets because, in his words, they've already found the right destination. No one applauded. No one declared him forgiven. He simply took his place beside everyone else. Looking back, I no longer think the missing plane tickets were the deepest betrayal. They were the moment the truth finally became impossible to ignore. Those two unused tickets would have cost $2,480. The text arrived at 8:14 p.m. The blue luggage tags never reached Hawaii. But they eventually carried something far more valuable than luggage. They carried a family away from a system where love had to be earned. Because the people who truly belong in your life should never have to wonder whether there's a seat waiting for them.